Right now, as you're listening to this, your brain is actively trying to stop you from thinking.
Yeah, which sounds completely absurd when you first hear it.
It really does. Because, even though your brain makes up only about, 2% of your total body weight, it's hoarding roughly 20% of your body's daily energy supply.
Right. It's a massive energy drain.
And biologically speaking, it basically views every single new decision you make or, every conscious thought you have as a massive, dangerous threat to those precious energy reserves.
It is functioning exactly the way evolution designed it to, honestly. I mean, conscious thought is just incredibly metabolically expensive. So your nervous system is constantly, relentlessly looking for ways to shut down the thinking process and just put your behaviors on autopilot.
Well, welcome to another deep dive. Whether you're someone who's actively trying to optimize your daily routine, or maybe you're trying to break out of a slump, or you are just insanely curious about the biological machinery operating inside your skull, right now this conversation is custom tailored for you.
Absolutely.
Today, we are pulling apart some truly fascinating research on the neuroscience of habit and high performance. And the mission here is really simple. We are going to completely dismantle the cultural myth that achieving your goals requires sheer, exhausting, white-knuckled willpower.
Because it doesn't at all.
Right. Instead, we're going to look under the hood at the actual biological mechanics of behavior. We want to figure out how to leverage your brain's natural laziness, honestly, to build practical, lasting habits without burning out. We're going to get into neuroplasticity, micro-commitments, habit stacking, and how to optimize your habit loop.
It's so important because the standard cultural narrative, it frames high performance as this test of moral character.
Oh, totally. Like a moral failing if you can't do it.
Exactly. If you want to get up at 5 a.m. and run a marathon or write a book or just get your inbox to zero, the underlying assumption is that you just need to grit your teeth and force it. Like you either have the discipline or you're weak.
Yeah, just do it, right?
Right. But the neuroscience we are looking at completely upends that paradigm. Relying on raw willpower isn't a sign of strength. It's actually a profound misunderstanding of human biology.
Which brings us back to that massive energy consumption we just mentioned. If willpower isn't the engine of high performance, what actually is?
So the central premise we really have to start with is that the brain is, above all else, an efficiency machine.
An efficiency machine.
Okay.
Yeah.
To understand why willpower fails, we have to look at the anatomy. When you use willpower to force yourself to do something difficult, like, say, resisting a donut in the break room, or starting a really complex spreadsheet, you are heavily activating your prefrontal cortex.
Right, and that's the area of the brain right behind your forehead.
Exactly. It's the part responsible for executive function, planning, impulse control, all that high-level stuff.
It's basically the CEO of the brain.
It is a very demanding, highly paid CEO. The prefrontal cortex requires an enormous amount of glucose to operate. Because it is so energy intensive, it acts like a battery that just rapidly drains throughout the day.
Oh, wow.
Every single time you make a decision, every time you suppress an emotion, every time you force focus, you're draining that battery. By the time 6 p.m. rolls around, the prefrontal cortex is just depleted. This is a phenomenon known as decision fatigue.
Oh, man. Okay, that explains so much. That explains why I can eat perfectly healthy all morning, but by the time I'm driving home from work, the drive-thru suddenly looks like completely irresistible. My CEO has basically just clocked out for the day.
That is exactly what is happening.
Right.
When the prefrontal cortex goes offline, the brain defaults to its older, more primitive structures to conserve energy. It wants to operate on autopilot.
Just coasting.
Right. Because the brain's primary directive is survival. And in the evolutionary environment we developed in, wasting calories on overthinking could literally mean starvation. So the efficiency machine actively tries to take any complex sequence of actions and turn it into a background process that requires zero conscious thought and, crucially, zero energy from the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, let's unpack this because I have a question here. If my brain is this ultimate efficiency machine and its entire goal is to automate things so I don't have to spend precious energy thinking about them, shouldn't it want me to automatically go to the gym?
You would think so, right?
Yeah, like shouldn't it naturally automate eating a salad instead of forcing me to agonizingly debate whether or not to order pizza?
It's a great question. The catch is that the brain's efficiency machine does not have a moral compass.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't know the difference between a habit that extends your lifespan and a habit that shortens it. It only categorizes behaviors in two ways, familiar and novel.
Okay.
And it will always, always prioritize familiar actions over new ones because familiar actions have already been optimized. They require almost zero cognitive load.
So sitting on the couch scrolling through a phone is highly familiar. It's a well-worn groove.
Highly familiar and therefore metabolically cheap.
Hmm.
Deciding to put on workout clothes, get in the car, drive to a gym, and figure out a weightlifting routine. That is novel, it's complex, and it's incredibly energy intensive.
Right.
So your brain looks at that proposed gym routine, and your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, actually registers that massive impending energy expenditure as a minor threat.
Wait, really? A threat?
It signals resistance. It pushes you back toward the cheap, familiar behavior to keep you safe.
That is wild. I want you, the listener, to think about your morning routine today. Think about the first 20 minutes after you woke up. You probably stumbled out of bed, navigated to the bathroom, grabbed your toothbrush, applied the toothpaste, brushed, and maybe started the coffee maker.
Yep, the classic routine.
But how much of that did you actively, consciously think about? You weren't standing at the sink agonizing over the complex motor mechanics of how to unscrew a toothpaste cap. Your mind was probably miles away thinking about a meeting you have later or a conversation from yesterday.
You are describing the basal ganglia at work right there.
The basal ganglia.
Yeah, so while the prefrontal cortex is the expensive CEO, the basal ganglia is the brain's automated factory floor. It's this older structure located deep near the center of the brain. Through repetition, your brain has completely offloaded the incredibly complex motor sequence of brushing your teeth away from the prefrontal cortex and pushed it down into the basal ganglia.
You've essentially outsourced the job to save money.
You have. And by doing so, you preserve your cognitive bandwidth for the complex, unpredictable decisions you'll have to make later in the day. So the goal of high performance, then, isn't to force the prefrontal cortex to work harder.
It's not about trying harder.
Exactly. It's to figure out how to program the basal ganglia. We want to move the behaviors we desire out of the expensive conscious brain and into the cheap automatic brain.
Okay, so how does that physical transfer actually happen? Because it's not just a psychological shift, right? We're talking about tangible physical changes inside the skull.
We are talking about neuroplasticity. I mean, the human brain is not a static piece of hardware. It is highly, highly malleable. It physically alters its own structure based on the inputs and behaviors you feed it. When you repeat an action, you are literally carving a new neural pathway.
The research uses this brilliant visual metaphor of walking through tall grass. And I find this so helpful because trying to picture microscopic neurons can be really abstract.
It's a great analogy, yeah.
So imagine you are standing at the edge of an overgrown, wildly dense jungle and you need to get to the other side. The very first time you walk through, it is a total nightmare. You are hacking away at thick vines with a machete, you are tripping over hidden roots, you're sweating, and you have to consciously calculate every single step. The exhausting trek is day one of trying a new habit.
It's a perfect physical representation of what is happening neurologically. On day one of a new behavior, a specific sequence of neurons in your brain has to fire together to execute that action. Because those neurons haven't communicated much before, the synaptic connection is weak.
It's like hacking through the jungle.
Right. The electrical signal traveling between them is slow, and it's prone to dissipating. It requires massive amounts of conscious energy from the prefrontal cortex to force that signal through.
But the more you walk that exact same path, the grass gets trampled down, the drink gets packed in.
Exactly. In neurobiology, there's a famous axiom: neurons that fire together wire together. As you force that signal down the same pathway repeatedly, the brain recognizes that this road is becoming frequently used. To make it more efficient, specialized cells in the brain, they're called oligodendrocytes, they begin to wrap the axon of the neuron in a fatty white substance called myelin.
Myelin. This is the insulation we hear about.
Yes, it acts exactly like the rubber insulation around a copper electrical wire. Without insulation, an electrical signal leaks out and loses strength. But as the myelin sheath thickens around your neural pathway through repeated action, it prevents the electrical signal from leaking. It accelerates the speed of transmission exponentially.
So it's the biological equivalent of upgrading from a screeching, slow dial-up internet connection to a lightning-fast fiber optic cable.
That is precisely the mechanism. The signal just moves effortlessly. The tall grass has been cleared, the dirt packed down, and eventually the brain comes along and literally pours asphalt over the trail. You've built a neurobiological highway.
Wow.
And once the highway is paved, the prefrontal cortex stops being involved. The basal ganglia takes over. You don't need the machete anymore. You just get in the car and cruise on autopilot.
And the secondary benefit here, which honestly feels like the actual secret to high performance, is that by paving these highways for your fundamental habits, you are hoarding your willpower for the things that actually matter.
Exactly.
If you automate your morning workout and your healthy breakfast, you arrive at your desk with a fully charged prefrontal cortex, ready to tackle complex, creative, high-level problems. You haven't wasted your CEO's time arguing about whether to put on running shoes.
You are fundamentally increasing your daily capacity for complex thought just by automating the mundane.
Okay, so the ultimate goal is clear. We want to build a dense network of fiber optic, asphalt-paved highways in our brains. We want myelin. But that inevitably leads to the most common question anyone trying to change their life asks. How long does the construction project actually take? Like, when does the tall grass become a highway?
Well, we really have to dismantle a very pervasive piece of folklore here. The cultural narrative has relentlessly pushed the 21-day rule.
Oh, yeah, 21 days to a new you.
We see it everywhere, in marketing, in fitness challenges, productivity apps. Do it for 21 days and you magically have a new habit.
Where did that even come from if it's not biologically accurate?
It's actually a crazy story. It largely traces back to the 1960s and a plastic surgeon named Maxwell Maltz. He noticed it took his patients about 21 days to get used to seeing their new faces or to stop feeling phantom sensations after an amputation.
Wait, really? A plastic surgeon?
Yeah. He wrote a wildly popular book noting that it takes a minimum of about 21 days to adjust to a new self-image. But over decades of a giant cultural game of telephone, society dropped the word minimum, ignored the context of plastic surgery, and decided that any habit takes exactly 21 days to form.
That is wild. We've based our entire cultural expectation of self-improvement on an out-of-context observation about nose jobs from the 60s.
Pretty much.
So what does the actual modern neuroscience say?
The modern research looks at large-scale studies where researchers tracked individuals attempting to build new habits, everything from drinking water at lunch to running every evening.
Right.
They tracked them for months, graphing the daily automaticity of the behaviors, like how much friction did the person feel?
Right.
When did it actually become effortless?
Right, and what did they find?
The data shows a completely different timeline. On average, it takes 66 days for a new behavior to become automatic.
66 days. That is more than 2 months.
And that's just the average. Depending on the complexity of the habit, it could take anywhere from 18 days for something incredibly simple, up to 254 days for a highly complex routine. But the median point where the neural highway is generally paved is 66 days.
I can hear the collective groan from everyone listening right now. I mean, imagine you're on day 25 of a new diet or a new writing routine. You've pushed past that 21-day mark. You were promised that it would feel easy by now.
And it's not.
No.
Yeah.
You wake up and it still feels like you're hacking through tall grass. It still requires a massive amount of your prefrontal cortex's energy. And now we were telling you, hey, great job, you only have 40 more days to go. That feels incredibly discouraging. It feels like we're moving the finish line.
I know it can initially feel like a heavy realization, but we really have to look at the psychological damage the 21-day myth has caused. When people operate under the false assumption of a 3-week timeline, expectation management completely breaks down.
Right, they think something's wrong with them.
Exactly. They reach day 22, the behavior is still difficult, and they make a catastrophic internal attribution. They don't blame the timeline, they blame themselves.
They think, the science says it should be easy by now. It's not easy for me. Therefore, I am broken. I don't have enough discipline.
They internalize the struggle as a character flaw. And this triggers shame. From a neurological perspective, shame is one of the most toxic emotions for behavior change.
Wow, really?
Yes. Shame spikes cortisol, it increases stress, and it drives the brain to seek immediate comfort, which usually means relapsing into the very cheap, familiar, automated behaviors you were trying to escape in the first place. Understanding the 66-day average completely neutralizes that shame.
It reframes the whole struggle. If it's hard on day 25, it's not because you're weak, it's simply because the biology takes time. The myelin hasn't fully wrapped around the axon yet. The asphalt is still wet.
Exactly. It validates the friction. When you accept the reality of the 66-day curve, you stop expecting a sprint and you start pacing yourself for a marathon. You prepare your environment and your mindset for a 2-month construction project.
This is a huge perspective shift for you listening right now. If you are actively trying to change a behavior right now and it feels like a daily battle, I want you to give yourself massive amounts of grace. You are simply in the messy middle of a biological construction zone.
Beautifully said.
But this reality creates a massive logistical problem. If the brain's prefrontal cortex battery drains quickly, and we know we can't rely on willpower, how on earth do we survive a 66-day marathon? We don't have enough willpower to force ourselves to do something difficult for 2 solid months.
No, we don't. If you try to brute force a massive change for 66 days, your amygdala will eventually win. The perceived threat to your energy reserves will just be too high, and your brain will sabotage you.
So what's the solution?
This is why the mechanics of behavior change must focus on circumventing the brain's alarm system entirely. We have to sneak past the guards
How do we do that?
by drastically lowering the energy requirement of the new behavior. The research points to a concept called micro-commitments. The fundamental rule here is consistency wires the brain. Intensity comes later.
Consistency wires the brain, intensity comes later. I like that.
Instead of relying on a huge surge of motivation to get you through a grueling 45-minute workout, you shrink the required behavior down so small that it is virtually impossible for your brain to register it as a threat.
The example I see often used is telling yourself you aren't going to work out, you are just going to put on your running shoes.
Right, think about the neurological difference there. If you tell your brain we need to do a high-intensity interval workout, the prefrontal cortex projects the energy cost. It calculates the physical exertion, the sweat, the muscle fatigue, the duration. The amygdala flares up and says, absolutely not. We had a stressful day at work, our energy is low, we need to conserve.
You feel that heavy wave of resistance.
Yes, and you sit on the couch. But if the agreement is literally just, I'm going to put my running shoes on and tie the laces, the brain does a very different calculation.
The brain assesses the task of tying shoes. It realizes it takes 30 seconds and burns perhaps 2 calories. The amygdala stays completely silent. The threat level is 0.
Exactly. You easily perform the action.
Okay, I get the biological hack here. You're slipping under the radar. But if I only put on my running shoes and then I just sit back down on the couch and watch television, how am I getting fit? How is this practical for high performance? It feels like we are tricking ourselves into settling for absolutely nothing.
I know, it is deeply counterintuitive for high achievers.
Yeah.
Because high achievers are obsessed with the intensity of the outcome. They want to see the calories burned, the pages written, the revenue generated.
Of course.
But during the first 30 to 40 days of the 66-day marathon, the outcome is irrelevant.
Yeah.
The only biological imperative is firing the sequence of neurons. Remember, consistency wires the brain.
You just need the electrical signal to travel down the path so the oligodendrocytes release the myelin.
Exactly. If you put your running shoes on at 6 a.m. every single day for 30 days, even if you never take a single step outside, you have fired that specific neural sequence 30 times. You are laying down the foundation of the highway.
Yeah.
You are shifting your identity. You are becoming the type of person who inevitably puts on athletic gear at a specific time.
You are overcoming the activation energy. It's like in chemistry, right?
Yeah.
A reaction might release a ton of energy once it gets going, but it requires a little spark of activation energy to start. Putting on the shoes is the spark.
That's a great way to put it. And practically speaking, human psychology naturally takes over once the activation energy is overcome. Once the shoes are on, the hardest part, which is the transition from a resting state to an active state, is complete. Very frequently, your brain assesses the new reality, realizes the shoes are tied, and decides, well, the friction of taking them off is almost as high as just stepping outside. Well, I might as well walk down the block. But by completely removing the requirement to run, you ensure the consistency of the habit loop. You never miss a day of wiring the brain.
So for you listening, we need to shrink your goals down to a microscopic level. What is your putting on the running shoes equivalent? If you want to write a novel, your micro commitment is maybe opening the laptop and typing 1 single sentence. That's it. If you want to start flossing, commit to flossing 1 single tooth.
Yes.
I know it sounds ridiculous to stand in the mirror and floss 1 tooth, but you are not trying to clean your teeth. You're trying to hack your basal ganglia.
You are playing the long game of neuroplasticity.
Now, even with a micro commitment, there's still a mechanical problem here. I might have agreed to only floss 1 tooth, but I still have to remember to actually do it. In the chaos of a normal day, relying on your memory to initiate a new habit is risky because, again, memory requires the prefrontal cortex. We need a way to trigger the behavior automatically.
Which is exactly why the implementation of a new habit requires an anchor. This is the concept of habit stacking.
Habit stacking.
Yes. Instead of trying to carve a brand new highway in the middle of an untamed jungle, you find an incredibly robust, deeply entrenched, multi-lane highway that already exists in your brain, and you simply build a tiny on-ramp from it.
So you attach the new micro-commitment to something you already do on autopilot every single day.
The structural brilliance of habit stacking is that it leverages the automation of the basal ganglia. Your brain already has sequences that execute without fail. Making your morning coffee, brushing your teeth, turning on your computer monitor, sitting in your car and turning the key. These are ironclad habits.
Right.
When you stack a new habit, you use the completion of the old habit as the trigger for the new one.
So the formula the research uses is, immediately after I do my existing habit, I will do my new micro-commitment.
The immediately after is critical. You are creating a sequential firing pattern in the brain. The existing habit provides the biological momentum. As the brain finishes the automated task of pouring the coffee, the electrical signal is already flowing strongly. You just divert a tiny fraction of that signal down your new on-ramp.
So what makes a successful anchor? If I want to build a habit stack, how do I pick the right existing behavior?
The strength of the anchor dictates the success of the stack entirely. An effective anchor must have two qualities. First, it must be something you do with unquestioned, absolute certainty. It cannot be something you only do occasionally or when you feel like it.
So you wouldn't want to anchor a new daily habit to after I do a load of laundry, because laundry day might shift, or you might skip a week.
Correct. The frequency of the anchor must perfectly match the desired frequency of the new behavior. If you want a daily habit, you need an anchor that happens every single day without fail. Second, the anchor should logically flow into the micro-commitment in terms of physical location and energy state.
Oh, I see. You wouldn't say, immediately after I turn off the shower, I will check my email, because physically, you are wet, you're in the bathroom, and nowhere near your laptop. It introduces way too much friction.
Exactly. The transition must be seamless.
Okay, let's actually map this out for the listener. I want to build a highly detailed sample daily schedule using these neurobiological principles. Let's imagine a listener who wants to build 3 habits that we know drive high performance. They want to do a quick mobility stretch to combat sitting at a desk all day. They want to ruthlessly prioritize their workday rather than reacting to emails. And they want to read more books instead of scrolling social media at night. How do we build this architecture?
Okay, I love this. We approach it chronologically, looking for the ironclad anchors in a standard day. Let's begin with the morning mobility stretch. We need a morning anchor.
The coffee maker. For millions of people, starting the coffee machine is practically a reflex.
A perfect basal ganglia loop. So the stack becomes, immediately after I press the start button on the coffee maker, I will perform one single mobility stretch while the coffee brews. Notice the construction there. The trigger is pressing the button. The micro-commitment is just one stretch, and the physical location aligns perfectly. You are standing in the kitchen waiting anyway.
That's a beautiful on-ramp. Okay, so you stretch, the coffee finishes, you go to work. Now we need to tackle prioritizing the workday. The goal is to identify the top 3 tasks before getting sucked into the inbox. We need an anchor at the start of the workday.
Well, a physical action is always a stronger anchor than a time on the clock. At 9 a.m. is abstract. When I physically sit down in my office chair is concrete.
So the stack is, immediately after I sit down in my desk chair, I will write my top 3 tasks on a physical sticky note before I touch the mouse.
Yes. The physical constraint is excellent. You use the act of sitting as the trigger, and you introduce a micro-commitment, writing 3 bullets on paper, which bypasses the digital distraction of the computer entirely. Over 66 days, the feeling of the chair against your back literally becomes the neurobiological trigger for prioritization.
That is incredible. Okay, finally, the evening. We want to stop the doom scrolling and read a book. We need an anchor at the very end of the day.
Pulling the bed covers back is a universal, unavoidable daily action. So the evening stack is, immediately after I get into bed and pull the covers up, I will read one single paragraph of my book.
1 paragraph. Again, the micro-commitment makes it impossible for the exhausted evening brain to say no. You've created a biological whip. The coffee machine triggers the physical health. The desk chair triggers the professional focus. The bed covers trigger the intellectual growth. And you haven't relied on a single ounce of brute force willpower. You are just riding the wave of your existing life.
It's so efficient. But to ensure these stacks permanently wire into the brain, we have to look at the complete anatomical structure of behavior. We've talked about the anchor, which acts as the trigger. But there is a 3-part biological cycle that must be completed for myelin to actually form.
This is what the research refers to as the habit loop.
Exactly. Every single automated behavior in human history, good or bad, is driven by a 3-part loop: a cue, a routine, and a reward.
Let's break those down because we've essentially been talking about the cue, right?
Yes, the cue is the trigger. It is the environmental signal that tells the basal ganglia to wake up and execute an automated script. In our habit stacks, the cue is pressing the coffee button or sitting in the chair. But to optimize the cue, the research dictates it must be incredibly obvious.
Right, like if your cue is pulling back the bed covers to read, but your book is downstairs on the kitchen counter, the habit loop breaks instantly. The friction is too high. You have to engineer your environment. You have to place the book literally on top of your pillow in the morning. So when you go to bed, the cue is physically obstructing you. You have to touch the book to get into bed.
You are eliminating the need for decision-making.
Mm.
But the most critical part of the loop, and the part where almost everyone fails, is the third step. You have the cue, the book on the pillow. You have the routine, reading one paragraph. But to ensure the brain remembers this pathway for tomorrow, there must be a reward.
Why is the reward biologically necessary?
It comes down to dopamine. Dopamine is often misunderstood simply as a pleasure chemical. But in the context of neuroplasticity, dopamine is a learning neurotransmitter. It is essentially the brain's save button.
The save button, I like that.
Yeah. When you complete an action and experience a spike of dopamine, that neurochemical washes over the neural pathway you just used. It acts as a chemical signal to the oligodendrocytes, telling them, hey, this behavior was highly beneficial to our survival. Insulate this pathway. Myelinate it so we can do it easier next time.
So if there is no dopamine spike at the end of the routine, the brain doesn't hit save.
Exactly. The brain calculates that the energy expenditure wasn't worth the biological payoff. The pathway degrades, and the next day, you are back to hacking through the tall grass.
But this raises a massive practical problem. If the routine we are trying to build is inherently difficult or dry, let's say reading a dense textbook for a medical certification, or doing your taxes, or holding a plank, how do we magically make the end of that routine satisfying? Reading a dry textbook does not naturally cause a massive release of dopamine like eating a slice of cake does.
No, it doesn't. And this is where we have to consciously hack the dopamine system. How performers learn to synthesize their own rewards. The reward doesn't have to be a massive external prize. In fact, relying on external physical rewards, like treating yourself to a cookie every time you go to the gym, usually backfires.
Because it creates competing neural pathways.
Exactly. You end up optimizing for the cookie, not the fitness.
So how do we synthesize a dopamine spike internally?
The brain is highly responsive to the perception of success. You can artificially close the loop through a moment of active, deliberate self-congratulation. It sounds incredibly simplistic, but when you finish that single paragraph of the textbook, you must pause, acknowledge the completion, and actively feel a sense of success. Some researchers suggest literally saying out loud, "Good job, I executed the plan."
Honestly, it feels ridiculous to sit alone in your bedroom and verbally congratulate yourself for reading 3 sentences.
It may feel ridiculous to the conscious mind, yes, but the basal ganglia doesn't care about your social embarrassment. It only reads the neurochemical state. That brief feeling of self-efficacy, that moment of checking the box, causes a microdose of dopamine that closes the loop.
You can physically augment that too. This is why habit trackers are so ridiculously effective. The physical act of taking a red marker and drawing a big, satisfying X on a wall calendar after your workout isn't just about record keeping. The tactile sensation and the visual confirmation of a streak provide a highly concentrated hit of dopamine. That X is the reward that tells the brain to myelinate the pathway.
Absolutely. You are intentionally designing a neurochemical payoff. You can also manipulate the environment to serve as a reward. If you have to do a difficult routine, like administrative paperwork, you pair it with a highly rewarding environment. You only do your paperwork while sitting in your favorite chair with your favorite premium tea, listening to a specific playlist you love. The sensory pleasure of the environment bleeds into the routine, tricking the brain into categorizing the entire loop as rewarding.
Cue, routine, reward. If you master that loop, you control the efficiency machine. But I want to pivot here and get very real, because up until now, we've been describing this perfect, sterile laboratory environment.
Which life never is.
Right. We are human beings. We have kids who get sick. We have cars that break down. We get the flu. We have days where our prefrontal cortex is so utterly drained by a life crisis that we honestly don't care about our micro-commitments. What happens when the loop breaks? The book stays on the pillow and you just shove it to the floor and go to sleep.
This is the most precarious moment in the 66-day marathon. The research and the source material dedicate significant attention to this exact scenario. Resilience, recovery, and the reality of the slip-up. And the data delivers a very clear, scientifically backed bottom line. Missing a single day does not materially impact the habit formation process.
Let's emphasize that for everyone. Missing one day does not ruin the neuroplasticity.
It doesn't. And we have to highlight the profound psychological trap that this data directly addresses. It is universally known as the all-or-nothing mindset.
I think every single listener knows this trap intimately. It's the diet phenomenon. You eat perfectly for 2 weeks. Then, at a birthday party, you have one single French fry. The all-or-nothing brain immediately declares, well, the streak is broken, the diet is utterly ruined, I might as well eat the entire cake, order 3 pizzas, and try again next year.
It is an irrational, catastrophic escalation. When people are trying to build a habit and they miss a day, especially if they falsely believe they have to be perfect for 21 days, they view the slip-up as a total systemic failure. They assume the progress counter resets to 0. Because they feel they have lost all their progress, the motivation to continue evaporates. They abandon the highway entirely.
But neurologically, that makes absolutely no sense. If we go back to our physical metaphors, if you have been packing down the dirt and laying down asphalt for 30 days, taking a 24-hour break doesn't mean the asphalt magically vaporizes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The physical structure of the myelin sheath remains intact. The neural pathway doesn't dissolve overnight. A single slip-up is nothing more than a minor statistical blip in a 66-day dataset. The brain's efficiency machine doesn't throw out the architectural blueprints just because the construction crew took a day off.
So the danger isn't the missed day itself. The danger is the psychological reaction to the missed day.
Yes. The danger is the cascade of shame that convinces you not to try again the next day, which leads to a second, third, and fourth missed day. That is when the pathway actually begins to degrade. The grass begins to grow back over the asphalt.
The research uses a specific word to describe how to handle the inevitable slip-up, and I think it is the most powerful word in this entire discussion. It says the goal is not perfection. The goal is to be a professional. The most professional thing you can do is simply get back on track tomorrow.
It completely depersonalizes the failure.
Yes. It strips all the emotional melodrama and the toxic guilt right out of the equation. If a professional plumber goes to work and a pipe leaks, he doesn't sit on the floor weeping, questioning his fundamental worth as a human being, and decide to quit the plumbing industry forever.
No, he just fixes it.
He just looks at the leak, grabs a wrench, and fixes it. He clocks back in. A professional habit builder needs to approach a missed workout with the exact same emotional detachment.
It requires a shift from emotional self-flagellation to objective troubleshooting.
I think we need to give you, the listener, a concrete step-by-step framework to be a professional about this. Let's create a specific slip-up recovery checklist based on the neuroscience of the habit loop. If a listener misses their new habit today, what exactly should they do tomorrow?
Okay, step 1 of the recovery checklist must fundamentally address the neurochemical state. Step 1. Acknowledge the slip-up entirely without judgment. You missed the day. It is a neutral data point, not a moral failure. By refusing to engage in shame, you prevent the spike of cortisol that drives further destructive behavior.
Step 1. Total neutrality, no guilt. Got it. What is step 2?
Step 2. Become an investigator of your own habit loop. Identify the structural breakdown. Why did the failure occur? Was the cue obscured? Did you miss the morning stretch because the coffee maker was out of beans so the anchor never happened? Or did you miss the workout because your micro commitment wasn't actually micro enough? Did ambition creep in, and did you secretly tell yourself you had to do a 45-minute workout which woke up your amygdala and triggered resistance?
That is brilliant. You troubleshoot the system. You do not blame the operator. You look for the broken link in the chain. Okay, so step 1, no guilt. Step 2, investigate the loop. I'd say step 3 is practical adjustment. Recalibrate the micro-commitment. If you fail to execute the habit, it means the activation energy was too high for your current state of exhaustion.
Precisely. You must shrink the commitment back down to an undeniable size. If you failed to read for 10 minutes last night, your commitment for tonight is to open the book and read one single sentence. You lower the bar until the brain's resistance drops to 0.
And then step 4 is the ultimate professional move. Recommit to the sequence for tomorrow. You ensure the cue is visible, you cue up the anchor habit, and you execute the tiny micro-commitment. You step right back onto the exact same neural highway you were already building.
That 4-step checklist, acknowledge without judgment, investigate the loop, recalibrate the commitment, and recommit, is the practical application of neuroplasticity. It ensures that a lapse does not become a relapse.
I want to remind everyone listening that the brain does not require perfection to physically wire a new pathway. It requires consistency over a long horizon. Giving yourself explicit permission to occasionally fail and having a clinical, emotionless plan to recover the next day is not a sign of weakness. It is a highly sophisticated, biologically informed strategy for long-term success.
It is the defining mindset of the 66-day marathon. You survive the marathon by outsmarting your biology, not fighting it.
This has been an incredibly dense and deeply practical journey today. We started by completely throwing out the exhausting, outdated paradigm of white-knuckled willpower. We realized that our brains are not looking to test our moral character. They're just energy-hoarding efficiency machines trying to survive.
We dove into the microscopic reality of neuroplasticity, understanding how repeated actions physically carve pathways, wrap them in myelin, and turn the tall, tangled grass of conscious effort into the paved, high-speed highways of automatic behavior. We saw how this automation preserves our precious prefrontal cortex energy for the complex decisions that actually shape our lives.
We shattered that pervasive 21-day myth and embraced the reality of the 66-day construction phase, giving ourselves the grace to be imperfect during the messy middle. We armed ourselves with the biological hack of micro-commitments, shrinking our goals down so small that we sneak right past the brain's threat detection system.
We built practical architecture by habit stacking, attaching new on-ramps to the ironclad automated routines we already perform. We learned how to manipulate the three-part anatomy of behavior by making our cues unavoidable and hacking our dopamine system to ensure the brain hits save on the reward.
And finally, we accepted the reality of being human. We realized that a single missed day doesn't magically vaporize a neural highway, and we equipped ourselves with a professional recovery checklist to drop the guilt and simply clock back in. It is a comprehensive, science-backed manual for operating the machinery inside your head.
It really is.
Now, at the very end of the research we've been analyzing today, the author leaves the reader with a direct, penetrating question. I want to pose this exact same question directly to you, the listener, right now. What is one tiny habit you are currently working to build? I want you to think deeply about this today. Don't think about a massive, life-altering overhaul. Look at the one thing you are struggling with. What is the absolute smallest version of it? What is your putting on the running shoes equivalent for today?
And if we extrapolate from all the biological mechanics we've unpacked, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to ponder. We have established that your brain is an ultimate efficiency machine. It is constantly, relentlessly, and automatically rewiring itself based on whatever actions you repeat, regardless of whether they are good or bad. So the vital question is this: what accidental neural highways are you currently paving in your life right now without even realizing it? What behaviors have you unconsciously automated? And more importantly, when you look at where those massive high-speed highways are taking you, is it a destination you actually want to reach?